century, global temperatures are set to rise by more than 3 degrees Celsius, and 1 million species face extinction. When I say this, how does it make you feel? Personally, it makes me feel a little alarmed, but mostly pretty anxious. Most likely, this is the only way you've been spoken to about climate change or biodiversity loss.
It's always alarming and shocking statistics that are meant to spur us into action, and luckily for many people it does, and already lots of them are making changes and living more sustainably. But still, most of us aren't, or can't seem to, even if we want to. I'm Zoe Lopez, and I'm a member of the Environmental Association, but I'm not here to lecture you about recycling or eating less meat. I'm here to talk about how we can inspire environmental action through empathy. So, what's stopping us from making the changes we need to make to combat climate change? The way I see it, there are 3 main roadblocks. First, there's climate change denial, where people don't believe it's real or human-caused. Second, there's defeatism, which is what I see most often in my own generation. And this is when we believe that there's no hope, so there's no point in doing anything about it. Third, there's climate anxiety, which is what I feel most often myself. And this is when the problem is so overwhelming that it's hard to think about without feeling really anxious, so it might feel easier to just not think about it at all. For all of these, the issue is not a lack of information. For a long time, we have educated almost exclusively with an information deficit model, which assumes that public skepticism to science or inaction is due to a lack of knowledge. This creates a one-way flow of information from the expert to the ignorant person, which lacks empathy, creates distance between the scientist and the ordinary person, and hasn't been effective. Alarming statistics are only going to make me more anxious and are only going to make my classmates feel like there's even less hope. And climate change deniers may not even believe them. So, what can we say? Although we may not be built to conceptualize large numbers like 1 million, we are built for relating to and understanding others. We tell stories and we empathize. So, what is empathy? It's the ability to understand and share the feelings of another, be it a human or an animal. We can use this idea when we talk about environmental issues. If we bring the discussion back to the individuals, to natural disaster survivors, or to the species suffering from habitat loss, and tell their stories, we let the listener empathize with them. For those feeling climate anxiety, zooming in can make the problem feel more manageable and allow us to take the first steps. For the defeatists, they can understand that whether or not we fail at preventing total collapse of our planetary systems, there's still suffering along the way which we can prevent. And for climate change deniers, this empathy may form a bridge to understanding the problem. So, psychology professor Jamie Berenguer from Spain set out to study this idea. He asked half of his participants to try to remain objective when they're looking at the image you are about to view, and to not get caught up in how the subject of the photo feels. Can this side of the room please follow those instructions? Now, the other half of participants were asked to try to empathize with the subject and try to imagine what it has gone through and how it feels about this. Can this side of the room please follow those instructions? So they were then shown this image. Take a little second to follow the instructions you were asked. Now, just like the participants in the study, can you think for a second of how sympathetic, compassionate, soft-hearted, etc. you feel towards the bird in the photo? As I imagine is the same in this room, in the study, the participants who were asked to empathize with a bird also felt more positively towards it than those who remained objective. The professor didn't stop there. He then asked the participants to decide how much of the university's budget should be donated to environmental organizations. And those in the empathetic group donated 20% more than those in the objective group, which goes to show that empathy can cause people to be more motivated to help the environment. So this is all well and good to say theoretically, but how can we do this practically? I'm going to give you an example that's dear to my heart. Since, as some of you may know, since this last year, the Environmental Association has formed a partnership with the Bioparc Genève in Bellevue, which is a local organization that cares for rescued and confiscated local and exotic animals and uses them as a way to educate the public about biodiversity loss. As I began volunteering there, I found myself more and more motivated to help the environment with every interaction with the animals I had, with every one of their stories I learned, and with every minute spent observing them. This inspired us to get others inspired in the same way. So we started a project with the grade 8s here at CDL with empathy and personal connection in mind. We presented a species to each homeroom, told them our personal experiences with the animal in the park, and those animals' life stories, which unfortunately for many of those in the park is one of neglect or abandonment. Then the students got to go and see the animals for themselves. It's one thing to learn that tamarin monkeys are critically endangered, and it is another thing entirely to stand in front of their enclosure and watch as the mother tamarin monkey jumps around with her babies on her back. Like there. So this empathy that formed between the students and the animals in the park drove them to become enthusiastic in this project, motivated, and showed a lot of dedication when they were asked to design signs to tell future visitors at the park practical steps they could take to protect the species in the wild. Here are some examples of the signs they made, which are now being used by the park, taken some elements, designed, redesigned. And we can see in the sign right here that even the students tried to use the concept of empathy themselves by having the tamarin monkey telling the visitors what to do, saying phrases such as, "Help me, don't forget me." So I think this project is a great example of the empathy that came from the ripple effect empathy had from the animals to us, to the grade 8 students, and hopefully to the future visitors of the park. So for all of you here who are educators, I would love you to take on this idea when you create curriculums, when you have discussions. And for everyone else, I'd love you to take the idea of empathy with nature into your daily life and how you view the world. As environmental educator Joseph Cornell puts it, one individual whose heart is full of reverence and love for nature can make ecological attitudes come alive for others as nothing else can. Let us create a ripple effect of empathy to catalyze real change. Thank you.